Good morning. Welcome back to our Ask the Agronomist video series. I'm Kyla Watson here with Phil Long. How you doing, Phil?
Doing good. Once again from screen away.
Yes, I know. It's an interesting world we live in these days.
Yep. Yeah, but we're making the best of it.
Yes, we are. Especially in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we're just thankful to have ways to connect and be able to share agronomic information.
Yeah, it's been very different this year, but there's been a lot of different experiences and people have, used them the best they can. And we've had great weather, especially for farming activities. So that's one thing we can all be thankful for.
Yes, I can't believe it's already December. It's crazy because you do see farmers out and about all throughout Latham country still in the field doing field work and applying fertilizer and whatnot.
Yeah, it's been a great opportunity to get, fertilizer, manure. I mean, there's just been a lot of extra time that we've had to get, plenty of tillage done and anything else that they're working on, hauling grain and stuff with the grain prices. So, yeah, it's been a good weather for all those activities.
Yes, it has. Well, this week we're going to be talking about using our 2020 yield data to help plan for 2021, but then also help learn from it and maybe compare that yield data to years prior and see what we can draw from it.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times I do most of the work, but I thought it'd be a good opportunity to, shed some of the light on some of the things I look for in yield data. And in a dry year, it's always an interesting combination of what happens in the soil. So it's a good opportunity to look back and compare to some other information.
Okay, well, we have three main points that we're going to touch on today. And let's just start with comparing 2020 to previous year's data.
Yeah, so that's really the first thing I start with. So I picked one of my own fields here to kind of use as an example. And when I'm comparing yield to previous years in order to make decisions off of whether it's for variable rate or different things like that, we always categorize things in our mind from the yield monitor perspective. So, we may look at the highest yield areas, the worst yield areas, and kind of those averages. But what a dry year does for us is really picks apart those in between. So I call them a medium high or a medium low area. It shows those edges of the organic matter differences and so forth in the field. So it's a great opportunity to compare and contrast between seasons. So we'll show you an example here just to kind of compare between two different years of yield information. One that I grabbed from one of our fields here. And it's interesting because 2020 is on the right side of the screen there. And what your eyes should be drawn to is how things contrast sharper. So the poor areas are definitely poor, and the lighter ground is more stark. It's easier to pick apart. So those areas in this field is hilly. It has quite a bit of contour to it. If you look at the pH, you'll notice that the sandy areas and stuff are going to show up. So those areas that are red or hilly, you can see those in between areas really well. And that's what I like to pick apart. So one of the things we do for our data forward customers is we typically create zones or productivity zones, management zones, whatever you want to call them. And even if you're not variable rate and seed or whatever the case may be, those zones provide a good opportunity to compare yield between years. So we may have 4 or 5 zones in a field, and we can compare those in between areas and say, okay, how much did it differ this year? We just been talking the last few weeks about how we don't want to make a ton of product decisions based on a tough year like this, but this year provides a great opportunity in terms of looking at this yield data and so forth to really delineate those areas that we use to manage differently. So in this example, like I said, you can, as you look across that map, you can see some of those areas on the right side that are much, the poor areas are poor, and the better areas you typically are better, the heavy spots. And it just really helps us delineate and fine tune those maps that we create to better manage it. Because that's how you want to think of your field. You want to think of it in a way that you can change management things that you're doing on each acre and even less than that. And in this field, it's variable enough, hilly enough that we can change that management, whether it's variable rate fertility or variable rate seed. So comparing years to years, obviously I'd look back several years and compare that map and just see how it changes over time, yield, averages, and so forth. But it's a good opportunity to compare to the season's yield.
Okay, very good. And what about when we compare that 2020 yield data to other maps of data?
Yeah, I hate getting bogged down, but there's really great things you can learn from using your yield data. So whether you get it back in a map form or use it on our data forward app or however you're using it, I provided a picture here. You'll be able to see side by side of the yield with soil sample. Now, this is the base to me. Your fertility in your field is paramount. That's the one first level of information you should always have. And in this case, it's a grid sample we just took this year to update every 3 years on this field. This is CEC, so cation exchange capacity. This simply gives you an indication. You can see the lighter spots just by the color of that field. But that CEC also tells you, okay, how much nutrient capacity, how much nutrient holding capacity do those soils have? So kind of in the center, I see some 24, 20s, things like that. That's obviously heavier soil. Then you get to an 11, 10s, things like that. Those are the hilltops. Those are the sandier spots. And that's a great layer of information along with organic matter and pH to look at this yield map and compare and see, okay, what are the things we can affect? Maybe it's pH. pH has a huge role in nutrient availability. It's one of the first things, obviously, you should look at. And if you're going to variable rate anything, I always say pH is the one thing that you should, especially in a field like this that has this kind of variability. So this is a great layer of information. To me, soil sampling should be the first thing that you always compare your yield to, because especially this year, as I've been looking at a lot of data and information, not skimping on fertilizer has definitely paid off for many farmers. Keeping that P and K levels in the ideal range is definitely paying off for most farmers. And obviously having natural organic matter and so forth pays too. But just having this comparison to look at is really important. Some of the other things that I would say, good information to look at, we have in our data forward app. If you have premium on it, you'll have imagery, and a lot of times we don't understand how to use that. But the nice thing about a dry year is you can compare that yield map back to your satellite imagery throughout the season to see how that health changed. Now, I always say imagery is a snapshot in time. It tells you right then and there how that plant health is changing because it's reflectance. It's like having your temperature taken. It's an immediate read of how things are going in the field. So it's a good indication here too. I know a lot of people don't irrigate, but one of those things that you can do in a dry year like this is understand the timing of when that stress occurred. So you can better understand maybe this field, more than 50% of it does have those tough areas. Maybe we should switch to more of a defensive hybrid or a hybrid that pollinates a little bit earlier, has that flowering period and elongates that grain fill time period, things like that you can change management characteristics of a particular product you're using on a farm. So those are important information to look at. The other top thing I look at is planting maps. And in particular, things like downforce. If you have maps on downforce, those kind of layers of information are really important to look at and compare back to yield and see, okay, was there an issue at the beginning of the season? And did it carry through the whole season? Is it something that I can fix with tillage or some other practice that I can impact and influence, just like we have on soil fertility?
Okay, very good. And the very cool thing with this Data Forward app is that you can really fine tune and pinpoint those areas of the field that you want to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it all comes down to, if you're not using your data to make decisions, then you're not using it for the best that it can be used for. And that's the point of Data Forward. That's what I always look for. I'm trying to find any piece of information that can help a farmer make a decision that would better that farm, that operation, their bottom line. So, the first thing, like I mentioned before, to me is I go straight to fertility, because fertility is the base of everything that's occurring on that farm. So pinpoint those areas, like I said, medium high, medium low, those areas that you don't think about a lot. Look at those and compare them to the soil map, and then really next year go out there and take some, whether it's a soil sample this fall or a in-season plant tissue test those areas and see how they compare. Because even if you have a 2.5 acre grid, it's not giving you every area of the field. So tissue samples are a nice way to follow up with a soil sample. The other thing I'd say is this maps that come out of a year like 2020 are a great opportunity to really, like I said, fine tune those variable rate maps if you're using things like seeding, and especially I didn't mention nitrogen. We don't talk about that a lot, but this a year like this year, yield follows the organic matter, and your yield map is one of the best ways to delineate that because it shows up really well, especially in a year like 2020 when it's drier if you have those conditions. So those are some great opportunities. I would say, compare, those average areas are also great candidates for things like if you're trying extra starter fertilizer or sulfur or things like that. Some of those areas that may not have the fertility that those other areas that your soil tests show they do, like I said, follow up with a tissue test and maybe target those areas for additional uses if you have the option on your planter for a starter and things like that, because those areas typically are good candidates that we don't think about, or maybe don't catch that because, like I said, we typically do low, medium, and high and things like that, and kind of forget about those in-between areas that show up in a year like 2020.
Okay, very good. It's a good time to continue to draw information from your 2020 yield data and look at your management practices and start finding ways to better it for the next year.
Yeah, exactly. We want to learn as much as we can, and this is a great time of the year to, obviously, it seems like we're a little bit more inside right now to begin with. Maybe it's cold, whatever the excuse is. A good time to just reflect on this year, and yield information is an excellent way to reevaluate how you're making decisions.
Okay, very good. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add this morning?
Nope. Continued good weather and good health, and I think we're all thankful for the weather we've been having, and it's a good way to lift our spirits. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Phil, for joining us this morning, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Have a good day.